10 people who mysteriously vanished from their workplace. Going to work should be a mundane occurrence. You show up at your place of employment, you do your job for several hours, and then you go home. However, frightening stories exist of people who leave their home for a seemingly routine day at work and never return. 1. Deborah Poe. Poe had 2 full-time jobs in 1990, one at a newspaper and one at the Circle K convenience store near Hall Road and Alama Avenue in Orlando, Florida. She worked the night shift alone, 5 nights a week, at the time of her February 4, 1990 disappearance. Poe's boyfriend saw her inside the store at approximately 1 a.m. A friend who drove by the store at 3 a.m. saw her standing behind the counter. At between 3:15 and 3:30 a.m., a customer came into the store and saw a Caucasian man behind the counter. He was between 19 and 25 years old, had long black hair and dark eyes, and was wearing a black t-shirt with the Megadeth rock band logo and a dragon spitting fire, a skull ring on his finger, and a wire earring with a cross in his right ear. He appeared to be the only person in the store and the customer assumed he was the clerk. She wanted some cigarettes, and had to point them out to the man because he did not know where they were. He used the cash register and made change when a customer made her purchase. This man has never been identified and it's possible he was just another customer, but investigators would like to question him and find out what he knows about Poe's case. A sketch of the individual is posted below this case summary. Poe's store was discovered unoccupied at 4 a.m. The customers who realized the store was attended called police. A cup of coffee and a carton of chocolate milk were on the floor behind the counter, and Poe's Circle K smock was also inside the store. Her car was undisturbed in the parking lot with her purse in the backseat. Her paycheck and car keys were also inside it. There was no sign of a struggle at the scene. The cash register was locked and there no evidence of a robbery. It appeared as if the store had simply been abandoned. Tracker dogs traced Poe's scent to the rear of the store, over a fence and to a road, where they lost the trail, which suggests she got into a vehicle. She has never been heard from again. Poe's boyfriend said men, some of them drunk, frequently bothered her while she was working the night shift at the Circle K, and he'd been concerned for her safety. A naked man chased her around the store 2 weeks before she vanished, until she was able to lock him out. Authorities said that they had a suspect in Poe's disappearance in March 2002, but refused to publicly identify the individual. Investigators searched an area of land near the Chapel Hill Baptist Church in Orange County around the same time. The location is in 8800 block of Trevorhon Road near State Road 417. Authorities stated that a re-examination of the evidence in Poe's case led them to the suspect and to the area. It is not known if any material was uncovered during the process. Poe grew up in Northern Virginia. She took ballet lessons for 14 years and dreamed of becoming a professional dancer. She moved to Orlando in 1989, and worked 2 jobs. The other one was in the retail sales department at the Orlando Sentinel. She purchased a brand new red Toyota, and planned to buy a home and open a catering business in the future. She was sharing a duplex with a female roommate. Poe's father and older brother have died in the years since her disappearance. Her mother is still alive, however, her case remains unsolved. 2. Lynn Burdick. One of Leonard Paradiso's favorite pastimes was hunting deer in the northern forests of Berkshire County. Another was kidnapping and killing young women. And former prosecutor Timothy M. Burke, the man who sent Paradiso to jail for life for the murder of an East Boston girl, believes the 2 hobbies may have merged. The author of the Paradiso Files, Boston's unknown serial killer, Burke can paint a timeline that puts Paradiso in Florida close to November 16, 1974. The day 18-year-old Kim Benoit, of North Adams, was found dead at the bottom of a wooded embankment along Route 2. Burke, 59, also believes Paradiso dumped his Oldsmobile in Boston Harbor just days after the disappearance of Florida's own Lynn Burdick, the 18-year-old McCann Technical High School senior who vanished from the Barefoot Peddler General Store in Florida on April 17, 1982. The Needham attorney presented this information Thursday night to 65 residents at the Florida Senior Center, including members of Burdick's family. While there is no evidence linking Paradiso to either case, Burke said the fact that the Boston native visited the northern Berkshires multiple times should make law enforcement officials curious. You had this individual in your midst, starting in 1967, Burke told the crowd, and anyone who he could get in his car was at risk. Paradiso was driven by an obsession. A fishmonger who went by the nickname Quahog, Paradiso had been involved in a number of assault cases leading up to his conviction of strangling and raping Marie Iannucci, 20, and dumping her body in a Saugus marsh in 1979. Paradiso, 65, died of cancer at a prison hospital this past February 27, just 2 weeks after the release of Burke's book, which implicates him in a number of unsolved slayings in the Boston area. Burke prosecuted 25 murder cases in his time as an assistant district attorney in eastern Massachusetts, but the details around the Paradiso case stuck with him. He said he wrote the book to help the families whose daughters, he believes, were killed by Paradiso, families who were left with nothing but memories and a lifetime of unanswered questions. I understand what it is like for a family to go through this kind of loss, the feeling that there are no answers, he said. The Berkshire County connection first popped up when Burke was investigating the Iannucci murder in the early 1980s. A search of Paradiso's apartment turned up multiple photos of the portly, curly-haired man dressed in orange hunting gear and wielding a rifle in the hills around Florida, including one taken near the Summit Motel, now called Giovanni's. The pictures span from November 1967 to November 1974. The latter of which coincides with the time Benoit went missing and was found dead roughly 3 miles from the Summit Motel. We sent a trooper out to Florida to investigate during the Iannucci trial, but nothing turned up, Burke said. Locally, police were stymied by the Benoit case, which still remains open. She was unemployed and living with friends in a housing project when she attended a dance at the local Sons of Italy in North Adams on November 1. The next time someone saw her, she was in the Florida embankment. Soon, leads dried up. Burke mentioned both Benoit and Florida in his book, and those references were noticed recently by Shelburne Falls resident Lance Gautier, a construction surveyor who has always had an interest in the two girls' disappearances. Gautier contacted Burke 6 weeks ago to ask if he knew about the Burdick case. "I had no idea this was on the radar," Burke said. Burke began to compile facts about Paradiso during the time frame Burdick went missing. It was a Saturday night, April 17, 1982, and Burdick was the lone clerk at a secluded convenience store in Florida that has since been torn down. At around 8:30 p.m., as her shift was ending, Burdick's parents, Rufus and Dorothy, called the store to see if she wanted a ride. When there was no answer, they sent their son, Brian, to check on her. Burdick was gone, as was $187 from the register. To her family, the shy high school senior was not the type to run off. She did not date or drive, and she spent her free time raising money for the disabled. She was scheduled to roller skate in a cerebral palsy benefit in Pittsfield 3 days later. Hundreds searched the woods for days, but she hasn't been heard from since. It was a story that shook all of Berkshire County and sent people into a panic in Florida, this mountain town of barely 700. Haunting investigators at the time was the near abduction and attack of a student in Williamstown less than an hour before Burdick's disappearance. A dark Ford sedan fitting the description of the vehicle used in the attack was later spotted by a North Adams police officer speeding east on Route 2, toward Florida Mountain and in the direction of the Barefoot Peddler. According to police records, the sedan was never spotted again. Burke put Paradiso in Revere on April 15, 1982, when the Quahog had a meeting with a parole officer who warned him that if he left the state, he'd be sent back to prison for a previous assault on a female. On April 22, a 1979 Oldsmobile Cutlass driven by Paradiso during this time was reported stolen from his girlfriend's house. It was one of 8 cars and 2 boats that were reported stolen by Paradiso during a 4-year period. Most were later found torched or submerged in Boston Harbor, including the Oldsmobile and a boat he named Malafmena, Italian for evil woman. "That's how he destroyed his evidence. He sank it," Burke said. "I have no evidence linking him to these crimes, but I know his mindset. If you follow his pattern, Lynn becomes another potential victim. I wanted the Burdicks to be aware of the info I have." Several members of the Burdick family weren't pleased to hear Burke's link, though. Roy Burdick, 75, a pastor at the local Baptist church and a cousin of Burdick's, said the timeline was nothing more than vague speculation. "I think it's wrong to create a scenario for these people who lost Lynn all these years ago," he said, raising his voice at the meeting. "Now they have to sit there and think, did this happen to my daughter? The same thing that happened to Iannucci? Theoretically, It could have been a number of people. Sue Allison, another cousin, said the Paradiso info brings no closure. There are a host of possibilities out there more solid than this one. In Burke's defense, Rufus, Burdick's father, spoke up at the meeting and said he appreciated Burke making the trip from Needham. "It's more information for us," said Rufus, whose wife, Dorothy, died in 1990. "And I guess anything helps." Rufus said he thinks about his daughter and her disappearance every day. Family members say they still find themselves scanning wooded areas on occasion, looking for clues. After the meeting, hugs and tears were shared. The story still hits close to home for many in this tight-knit community. Lieutenant Dave Secco of the North Adams Police Department was one of several police officers who attended Burke's speech Thursday night. He said police never forget about an abduction that happens in their vicinity. "Is it possible that Paradiso did this?" "Anything is possible," he said. "There are coincidences, but they're just that. From a police perspective, you can never discount any new information." Paradiso was arrested for Iannuzzi's murder on July 6, 1982, 5 months after Burdick went missing. He was convicted in 1984. Berkshire County District Attorney David F. Kaplis said both the Benoit and Burdick cases, as well as a handful of other local unsolved abductions and killings, remain open and are assigned to detectives. He said a detective made contact with Burke several months ago about the information he had on Paradiso. Kaplis declined to talk about the cases in detail. "We were aware of Burke's book for some time and took the opportunity to speak with him about what info he has and what opinions he has," Kaplis said. "We're always interested in information on any case." In 1995, Burdick's father received an anonymous note claiming his daughter had been abducted and killed. Burdick said he turned the letter over to police as soon as he received it, but it didn't amount to anything. 3. Curtis Pishon. Pishon was a police officer in Concord, New Hampshire for 10 years. He retired from the force after he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1994. Pishon was hired by Reliable Security Guard Agency to work third shift at Venture Corporation in Seabrook, New Hampshire in 1998. Venture Corporation manufactured plastic parts for automobiles. It is now defunct. He was living at the Hampton Inn, a residential motel on Highland Avenue in Hampton, New Hampshire in 2000. His family stated that he rarely socialized and was often depressed as the result of his medical condition. He drank frequently and had been fired from a previous security job for showing up drunk. On July 3, 2000, Pishon paid his father $200 to purchase a gun Pishon sold him several years earlier when he was having financial difficulties. Pishon arrived at work at approximately 9:30 p.m. on July 4. His co-workers said he appeared to be in good spirits and was behaving normally at the time. His supervisor checked in with him at approximately 12 a.m. on July 5 and reported that there were no problems reported at the plant. Around the same time, there were reportedly 2 cars full of rowdy Hispanic individuals parked at the Extra Mart across the street. It is unknown if these people had anything to do with Pishon's disappearance. Pishon's vehicle caught fire in the parking lot sometime after his supervisor's phone call and was a total loss. He summoned the fire department at approximately 2 a.m. A firefighter reported that Pishon seemed calm despite the condition of his car. Pishon's last entry in his logbook was placed at 2 a.m. upon the fire department's arrival at the scene. Several co-workers taking a break saw Pishon walking around Venture Corporation at approximately 3:15 a.m. Pishon has never been seen again. An employee reporting for work at 3:45 a.m. noticed that Pishon was not at his station. His cigarettes, packed lunch and contact lens solution were inside the guard shack. Another co-worker observed 2 unidentified vehicles speeding out of the plant's parking lot around that time. It is not known if the cars were involved in Pishon's disappearance. An extensive search of the area produced no clues as to Pishon's whereabouts. He had told his family that he was concerned about possible illegal activity, including drug deals, in Venture Corporation's parking lot in 2000. There have been a few indications of some wrongdoing, including the vandalization of vending machines and damage to one door on the property, but no other evidence has been located to support Pishon's theory. Prior to his disappearance, he had told loved ones that he feared for his personal safety. He claimed that a co-worker had threatened him. The night of his disappearance he was upset because he had no backup in case anything went wrong on his job. He purchased his old police gun back from his father, whom he had sold it to. Pishon had a legal permit to carry the gun concealed and loaded. Investigators have said that the fire which destroyed Pishon's vehicle was suspicious. There was no sign of arson or any accelerants at the scene, but no indications that the fire had started accidentally either. Many of Pishon's favorite possessions were inside his car at the time it burned. The fire was so close to the guard shack, it singed the shack's walls. The gun Pishon purchased from his father was located inside his apartment at the Hampton Inn after his disappearance. It was still wrapped in the paper bag his father had sold it to him in. There has been no activity on his social security number or on his bank account since July 5, 2000. Pishon's family does not believe he committed suicide, and there is no evidence to lead investigators to theorize he killed himself. There were no deliveries to the plant that night, and no taxis made pickups in the area at the time of Pishon's disappearance. The only calls he placed from the guard shack that night were to his mother. Pishon's medical condition would have made it difficult for him to have walked very far. At the time he disappeared, he was planning to purchase a new car, and looking forward to a family vacation. He left behind his lunch, glasses and cigarettes. He has not collected any of his pension checks, and there has been no activity on his bank accounts or credit cards since his disappearance. Pishon's loved ones believe foul play was involved in his disappearance. They believe he was abducted and murdered. The co-worker who allegedly threatened him had an alibi for the time Pishon disappeared. There is some speculation that his disappearance may have been related to his previous work as a police officer. He was a street officer who was not involved in violent crime investigations, but reportedly had affairs with two fellow officers' wives. No evidence has turned up to indicate that this had anything to do with Pishon's disappearance. However, Robert E. April, a co-worker, is considered a person of interest in Pishon's case. In October 2008, he was arrested for threatening to kill the brother of a man who owed him a small amount of money. In his threatening statement, April allegedly said he'd killed Pishon and buried his body. April hasn't been charged in connection with Pishon's disappearance. Pishon worked for a while as a police dispatcher after graduating high school, then joined the army, where he served as a military police officer in Korea. He joined the Concord Police Department after his return to the United States in 1983. He has a bachelor's degree in management from Franklin Pierce College. Pishon was declared legally dead in April 2008. His case remains unsolved. 4. Suzy Lampliug. Renewed hope of solving the mystery of missing estate agent Suzy Lampliug, 24 years after she vanished without trace, quietly faded this week in a meadow between Pershore and Drake's Broughton in Worcestershire. The final clue to her whereabouts was an appointment to show a house to a Mr. Kipper. At 12:40 p.m. on 28 July, Suzy had left her office, Sturgis & Sons, 654 Fulham Road, taking her house and car keys and a purse with £15 and credit cards, but leaving her handbag behind. 10 minutes later she was seen waiting outside an empty property, 37 Charles Road, which had only been on the market for 1 week. At 1:00 p.m. she was joined by a man, presumably the Mr. Kipper she had written in her diary, who was dressed immaculately, as if he's used to it, and minutes later they were seen walking away from the house. At 6:45 p.m. her manager reported Suzy's disappearance to the police. Suzy's office car was discovered by the police about a mile from her office in Stevenage Road, Fulham, just after 10:00 p.m. There were no signs of a struggle, no fingerprints unaccounted for. The driver's door was unlocked. The handbrake off and her purse was in the glove compartment, but her keys were missing. The following day, 29th July, there was an article in the London Evening Standard headed "Kidnap Fears for Estate Agent's Girl." Scotland Yard reported there was grave concern for her safety. Wednesday, 30th July, was her mother Diana's 50th birthday, and the Lampliug's home in southwest London was besieged by journalists. Diana Lampliug welcomed the media as a way of finding Suzy. On the Thursday, Diana and her husband, Paul, appeared twice on television, on BBC's Breakfast Time and TVM's Good Morning Britain. Diana articulated her fears. "I feel she is shut up somewhere, that she is being held against her will. I feel that because she hasn't contacted us, she is a very strong, very fit lady, so she should be able to cope with most situations." As the media interest was building up, sacks of letters were being delivered to the Lampliug home. Some were from friends who were praying for them. It seems so particularly unjust a thing to happen to a family which has always shown care and love for others, especially in their distress. Others were from strangers who had met Susie. Susie bought my green Renault off me and she struck my husband and I as a smashing girl. A few days after Susie went missing, Diana showed a journalist the piles of letters. I think we've heard from the entire town's woman's guild. It's something everyone can relate to, and a lot of them said they felt almost as if it had happened to them. On 4th August, a week after Susie disappeared, Diana confided on BBC TV's London Plus that she was beginning to realize that her daughter might be dead. I can face up to the fact that she has died, but I cannot face up to what has happened between. That's too much. Paul has explained since that Susie suffered from fear of being in a closed space. She had once panicked in a cable car, and they knew she would have been terrified to be shutting somewhere. They found it easier to believe she was dead than that she was still suffering. Despite a police reconstruction and extensive media coverage during the press's silly season, no information was forthcoming on Susie's fate. As Diana wrote 5 years later, there has not been a single trace of her. Nothing, just as though she has been erased by a rubber. Scotland Yard have said their prime suspect was convicted rapist and killer John Cannon, who is understood to have used the nickname Kipper in prison, though no firm evidence has ever been. One of the UK's strangest unsolved mysteries is now 30 years old and still baffles police. How you can help. Susie Lampley Youth Trust is a national charity committed to raising people's awareness of personal safety, and helping them to avoid becoming the victim of violence and aggression. We believe that everyone should be able to live their lives without fear. 5. Lisa Geis. Geis was last seen at her place of work, a picture frame company in Norcross, Georgia, on February 26, 1989. It was her day off, but she had gone there to run inventory. That same day, someone started a fire at the company. The fire triggered the sprinkler system, but the sprinklers were not connected to an alarm, so the water poured for hours without being detected. When employees arrived the following morning, the water was ankle-deep on the floor. Near Geis's desk, where the fire had started, was a pool of blood. Due to the circumstances, authorities began searching for Geis immediately. Her purse was found on the roof of a nearby building. Nothing was missing except the keys to Geis's car, a 1983 Nissan Pulsar. The vehicle was found parked a block away. In the woods near Geis's workplace was a 10-pound doorstop and a cloth mail card, both stained with blood. Some bloodstains were also found on the door of a company van. There was no sign of Geis or her remains. Authorities attempted to test the blood at her work site for DNA, but the water had destroyed the DNA in the blood. It had been raining the day Geis disappeared and the blood-stained items outside got wet, which precluded the possibility of doing DNA tests on them. Investigators have never been able to determine whether the blood was Geis's. Authorities suspected that a former employee of the picture frame company may have had something to do with Geis's disappearance. He had been fired from the company for falsifying his resume, and he was also on probation for embezzling money from a previous employer. Investigators believe he may have gone into the company building to erase their computer files as revenge for his termination. The company's computer showed someone was in the building sabotaging the system the day of Geis's disappearance. They theorize this individual encountered Geis and murdered her so she could not inform the police of his actions. The suspect was arrested for probation violation after Geis's disappearance. He maintained his innocence in her case and refused to cooperate with the investigation. The suspect has no alibi for the time Geis disappeared. Authorities tested the suspect's BMW car with luminol, a substance designed to detect blood traces. The luminol revealed spots on the vehicle, but there was not enough of a sample to determine whether the specks were blood, and luminol can also test false positive for about 100 other substances, notably bleach. Several years after Geis's disappearance, the suspect's ex-wife told authorities she believed Geis's body was in a well on property she and the suspect had owned in Talbot County, Georgia. Investigators searched 6 well sites, but turned up only animal carcasses. The suspect has not been publicly identified and has never been charged in connection with Geis's case. All of the employees working at Geis's company at the time, her roommates, and her fiancé were ruled out as suspects after her disappearance. She had no enemies authorities know of, and she was planning to marry just weeks after she vanished. Geis is a native of Pensacola, Florida and had resided in Gwinnett County for about a year before she vanished. Investigators stated they had received no substantial leads in Geis's disappearance since 1992, and her case is no longer being actively investigated. Foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. Gwinnett, Georgia police are investigating. 6. Brian Carrick. Brian left his home in the 4000 block of North Johnsburg Road in Johnsburg, Illinois between 6:30 and 7 p.m. on December 20, 2002, and headed across the street to Val's Foods, where he worked as a stocker. He had asked a co-worker to switch hours with him that night, but was turned down. No one saw Brian leave the store. He was reported missing by his parents at 2:45 p.m. the next day. They had noticed his absence at 8 a.m. that morning, but had thought he was at work until 11:45, when someone from Val's Foods called them and they realized Brian was not there. The day after Brian's disappearance, an employee at Val's Foods discovered a pool of about a half-liter of watery blood in the produce cooler. He told his boss, who thought it was meat drippings. Excess meat at Val's Foods was occasionally stored in the produce cooler, particularly around Christmas time, and had him clean it up. Only after Brian was reported missing did anyone realize the significance of the find. Additional drops of blood were located both inside and outside the cooler, on several produce boxes throughout the store, and on some boxes in the trash compactor. Police were able to get traces of blood from the mopped area. DNA testing confirmed that the blood was Brian's. Brian appeared to be in good spirits the day he disappeared. He cashed his $150 paycheck, bought pizza and told a cashier he planned to rent some movies. His family and friends say it is uncharacteristic of him to leave without warning. He was a junior at Johnsburg High School at the time that he disappeared, and was described as a well-behaved teenager and an exemplary employee. When he vanished, he left behind about $1,000 in the bank which he had saved from years of working various jobs. In June 2007, authorities announced a major breakthrough in his case when Mario A. Cassiero was charged with perjury in connection with his grand jury testimony about Brian's disappearance. He was Brian's supervisor at Val's Foods. Prosecutors stated he lied to the grand jury when he denied having told a friend that he knew how Brian was killed and how his body was concealed. In August 2008, another former Val's Foods employee was charged with concealing Brian's homicide. The case against him was later dropped. However, Cassiero was tried in August 2009. His friend, Alan Lippert, stated Cassiero told him Brian owed him drug money and he told a friend, Shane Lamb, to scare him, but things got out of hand and Brian died. Cassiero allegedly said his relatives helped him dispose of the body, which was initially buried but later dug up, dismembered and thrown into a river in Iowa. Lippert admitted he'd been drinking heavily the night Cassiero supposedly confessed to him. He didn't tell the police about the conversation until after he was arrested for driving under the influence, but he stated he came forward out of conscience and wasn't offered leniency for his testimony. While Cassiero was on trial for the charges, the presiding judge tossed them out, ruling that the prosecution had failed to prove its case. In February 2010, just months after being acquitted of perjury, Cassiero was charged with first-degree murder in Brian's case. Authorities believe Cassiero, Lamb and possibly others were involved in the homicide and cover-up. After his arrest for cocaine possession, Lamb decided to cooperate with prosecutors. In exchange for a reduced sentence in the drug case and immunity from prosecution in Brian's murder, he agreed to testify against Cassiero. According to the indictment, Cassiero or someone acting on his instructions struck Brian in the head in an act of unlawful restraint or intimidation. Brian died as a result, and Cassiero covered up the death. Photos of Cassiero and Lamb are posted below this case summary. At Cassiero's trial in February 2012, Lamb stated Brian, Cassiero and he had been selling marijuana and Brian owed Cassiero $400 to $500. Lamb said Cassiero sent him in to help be the muscle to get the money from Brian. Brian was unable to produce the money, and the three of them argued inside the store's cooler. Lamb struck Brian in the head, knocking him unconscious. Then Cassiero told him to leave. He said he never saw Brian again and didn't realize he was dead until later. Lamb, who weighed over 100 pounds more than Brian did, admitted he had a long criminal record and a history of violent assaults against others. He estimated he had beaten 50 people in his lifetime. He stated he never intended to cause Brian's death. The jury was unable to reach a verdict. They deadlocked at 11-1 in favor of convicting Cassiaro of murder. The prosecution announced they would retry the case. In June 2012, one of the potential witnesses, Robert Render, died of a drug overdose in a halfway house. A photo of Render is posted below this case summary. He'd been one of Brian's co-workers, and his blood had been found in the walk-in cooler with Brian's. He initially gave a statement implicating Cassiaro in the murder, but later retracted it. The prosecution stated they didn't think Render's death would affect the upcoming retrial. He had an extensive criminal history and his story about Brian's disappearance had changed many times, so the prosecutor didn't think he'd be a credible witness. Cassiaro was retried in 2013, and convicted of murder in November of that year. In September 2015, however, a court of appeal overturned his conviction and also ruled that the prosecution could not try Cassiaro again. The appeals court said there was insufficient evidence to convict and serious flaws in the prosecution's case, including the fact that Lamb was given full immunity. Cassiaro has been released from prison, although the prosecution plans to appeal the ruling to the Illinois Supreme Court. Brian's family has long believed he was murdered, and they have held a memorial ceremony for him. He is the 11th child of 14 in his family, 8 of whom have worked at Val's Foods. 4 of his siblings still lived at home when he disappeared. Brian's mother died in 2009, but the rest of his family is still alive and hopes for resolution in his disappearance. Foul play is suspected in his case due to the circumstances involved. 7. Kim Leggett. On October 9, 1984, Kim Sue Leggett disappeared from her place of employment in Mercedes, Texas. 33 years have passed and there are still no answers as to what happened to Kim, and the case has gone cold. The Texas Department of Public Safety, believing it likely Kim was murdered, placed her on their top 12 Texas Rangers Unsolved Homicide page in 2013. Kim is most likely deceased, but she still hasn't been found and the question of who did it remains. Kim was 21 years old at the time of her disappearance. She left behind a 1-year-old son and a husband. She worked as a secretary for the Ross Cotton Gin, which was owned by her father-in-law. At 4:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared, Kim was seen outside the gin helping a customer weigh a load of produce. Shortly thereafter, Kim was seen standing by her car talking to 2 men. There was also another car parked nearby. The car was white and possibly some type of sports car. By 5 p.m., Kim was gone. Her car was still there with her purse and keys inside. Everything in her office was left as if she stepped out for a moment, thoroughly expecting to return. 15 minutes before Kim officially vanished, things took an odd and ominous turn in the form of 2 phone calls. The 2 calls were made to Kim's parents at 4:45 p.m. on the day Kim went missing. Some sources say 1 call was made. I'm going with Kim's Charlie Project page, which indicates 2. The caller said they had abducted Kim and wanted a ransom. Her family initially thought it was a joke until her father drove to the gin and discovered Kim's belongings all left behind. Shortly thereafter, the family received a ransom note in the mail demanding $250,000. The letter appeared to be in Kim's handwriting, but the writing on the actual envelope belonged to a different person. The alleged kidnappers were never heard from again. There were hardly any suspects in Kim's disappearance. Her husband Mark Leggett cooperated fully with authorities and eventually obtained a divorce from Kim. There is much speculation on some internet links that this makes him look guilty of something. Her stepfather, Lefty Gardner. Gardner was a member and pilot of the Confederate Air Force, now known as the Commemorative Air Force. There was talk that Lefty refused to smuggle contraband into Mexico, and that Kim was abducted in retaliation for his refusal. There was no evidence found that substantiated this as a possible scenario. There were some flaws into the investigation of Kim's possible abduction. Disappearance. 2 of the biggest mistakes were the Mercedes Police Department waiting 20 days to call in federal investigators in the area where Kim went missing not being treated as a crime scene. Most information suggests the case wasn't mishandled deliberately. It may have been more that a small police department was unfamiliar with handling a case of this nature. However, 20 days is such a long time in a missing person, kidnap case, and who knows what evidence went undiscovered. Would Kim have been found if things were handled properly? Federal investigators have many more resources that could have been tapped into. In 2012, The FBI released aerial photos of the area around the Cotton Gin in hopes of sparking new leads and interest in the case. Despite those efforts and a $100,000 reward, no one has come forward with information. DNA testing was also done on the envelopes and led nowhere. So what happened to Kim? Did she leave willingly to start a new life? Was she kidnapped by men she knew, or was it random? I seriously doubt it was random, because who drives out to a Cotton Gin to abduct someone? I believe those two men specifically went there to abduct Kim. Did she know these men? I honestly don't know. She was chatting with them, but at a place of business that wouldn't be unusual to make small talk with customers. Did the kidnappers make her write the ransom note? I think it's very likely. She may have thought by cooperating, she would be released. Is Kim dead? I would have to agree with the authorities on this. I doubt she was alive for very long after being taken. Was her husband at the time somehow involved? He was cleared, but again, the investigation was mishandled, so could he still be a viable suspect? 8. Trevlyn Evans. Mystery surrounds what happened to an antique dealer who vanished 25 years ago, after leaving a note saying she would be back in 2 minutes. Married Trevlyn Evans, 52, disappeared without a trace after sticking the handwritten note in the door of her shop in Langland, Northeast Wales. Her husband, Richard, died last year without ever finding out what happened to his beloved wife. Speaking on the 25th anniversary of her disappearance, her brother Leonard Davis, now 71, remains desperate to discover what became of his sister, who was last seen on June 16, 1990. I've heard nothing at all in the last few months, not a thing, but to be truthful, I have never given up, he said. I have never lost hope that something will turn up. This is a difficult time of year and I have been thinking about her all week. I still think about Trevlyn a lot and still miss her very much. He added, I remember the Saturday she went missing as if it was yesterday. If you asked me what I'd been doing a fortnight before, or even yesterday, I couldn't tell you, but that day, I'll never forget. On the day she went missing, Trevlyn left her shop, Attic Antiques, on Church Street, at about 12:40 p.m., leaving the note on the door. At about 1 p.m., Trevlyn bought an apple and a banana and was seen crossing Castle Street. It is thought she may have returned to her shop at this point, as a banana skin was found in a waste bin there, though it was impossible to know whether it was the one bought that day. The last confirmed sighting of Trevlyn was near her home on Market Street at 2:30 p.m. There were 2 more suspected sightings of Trevlyn later on the day of her disappearance, although both are unconfirmed. 5 minutes after Trevlyn was seen on Market Street, a woman matching her description was seen walking out of town, along the A5 towards Corwin, beside the Riverside Park. A further 1 hour and 10 minutes later, at 3:45 p.m., there was another sighting, this time of her walking into Park Avenue from the direction of the River Dee, and then she vanished. Speaking in 1992, Detective Chief Inspector Colin Edwards, who was heading the continuing investigation into the disappearance, said, "It is without doubt the strangest inquiry I have ever been involved with. How a happily married woman could vanish without trace on a sunny Saturday morning in a busy town center is totally baffling." Trevlyn's husband had been away during the week of her disappearance, and was renovating the couple's holiday bungalow near the coast at Rutland. She had spent a couple of days there but returned to Langland on Wednesday, June 13. When the case was reopened in 2001, the main focus of the inquiry was Trevlyn's movements in the days between her return to Langland and her disappearance. An artist's impression of a man in a blazer apparently seen in her company was drawn up and circulated during the investigation in 1990. However, it had failed to bring anyone forward and was later disregarded as no longer accurate by officers in 2001. North Wales Police have confirmed the case remains open, but the investigation is not currently active. Mr. Davis is refusing to give up hope but said it was unlikely the investigation would be reactivated. He said, "The officers who worked on the case at the time, the ones I got to know, have all retired. There are no new theories about what happened, or any fresh evidence, and I realize the police have financial limitations. I would like the investigation to continue. I am forever hopeful of finding out what happened." Over the years, sightings of Evans came in from such places as London, France, and Australia, but none of them were confirmed. An unidentified man was reportedly seen in the shop around the time Evans vanished, but that lead never went anywhere either. After 25 years, Travlin Evans's disappearance remains one of the most baffling missing persons cases in the history of the United Kingdom. 9. Kelly Wilson. It remains Gilmer's and Upshur County's greatest unsolved mystery. It destroyed lives, damaged friendships and gave Gilmer national exposure of the unwanted kind. And a pretty young girl who is the subject of the case remains missing, presumed dead. Kelly Dye Wilson, then 17, vanished without a trace after leaving her job at NTV, Northeast Texas Video, a prominent, now long since closed, video rental store located on the north side of the courthouse square, in a building Kingsman Home Healthcare now occupies. She disappeared that January 5, 1992 night. This past Thursday was the 20th anniversary of her disappearance. It remains an open, though cold case. She was on her way to make a deposit for the business at the drive-through window of Gilmer National Bank, then located in what is now the Upshur County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. Someone did make the NTV deposit, but the grainy film from the surveillance camera was not sharp enough to show if it was Kelly or not. It also appeared that there was a second person in the passenger seat of the vehicle. Her car, with a tire slashed, was found parked at the store by her stepfather, Robert Carlson, who notified Gilmer police. All her personal property, including her purse, remained in the car. Only her keys were missing. A young man, Michael Bybee, was eventually arrested on a misdemeanor charge of criminal mischief in the tire slashing incident, but was never connected to the girl's disappearance. On the morning of Tuesday, January 7th, my second day on the job as editor of the Gilmer Mirror, Gilmer Police Sergeant James Brown contacted the Mirror and other media, asking our help in notifying the public that the girl was missing, and asking anyone with any information to contact the Gilmer Police Department. Hundreds of volunteers directed by Sergeant Brown spent thousands of man-hours searching backwoods to see if they could find her body. Dozens of tips, all of them turning out to be false, were followed. Sergeant Brown became obsessed with the case and spent hundreds of hours on his own time tracking down leads, outside of his regular police duties. A former law enforcement officer, who is now retired and asked not to be identified, said we, Gilmer Police and the County Sheriff's Office, never worked harder on any case than we did on that one. He also said that 3 people know what happened to Kelly Wilson, and 2 of them are still alive. He did not identify who they were. The case took a bizarre turn in late January, 1994, when a grand jury indicted Sergeant Brown and 7 others, most members of the Eugene Kerr family, with the murder of Kelly Wilson while performing satanic rituals. Several children had been seized by Child Protective Services amid allegations of child abuse, including sexual abuse, against their parents. CPS workers persuaded the Upshur County District Attorney's Office to bring in a special prosecutor to handle the multiple cases. They brought in Galveston attorney Scott Lifford. While in CPS custody, some of the children allegedly told them that they had witnessed the murder of Kelly Wilson. Lifford went to the county grand jury and got the indictments against the 8. Brown was at a training class at Texas A&M University when he was arrested. As the story progressed, wilder and wilder stories circulated about the case. A satanic cult was allegedly operating in Gilmer. Lifford set up a special team of investigators to work with the case. Information was allegedly coerced from the Gilmer children, as well as some of those indicted in the disappearance. The children were allegedly led and programmed to tell the stories the investigators wanted. Some of the defendants were allegedly offered life in prison, rather than the death penalty, if they would confess to the killing. A report at the website findkerryculberson.com, entitled Kelly Wilson Rumors Fly, summarized the situation that had developed in Gilmer. The internet report stated that the investigation into the 17-year-old's 1992 disappearance turned into a sideshow. In the words of one state official, investigators working on little but hearsay created a mythology about a satanic cult, leading to what some describe as a modern witch hunt. They indicted a whole family and even a police investigator, destroying his law enforcement career, straining his marriage and prompting death threats. They backed down only when fed-up community leaders asked the state for help. The Texas Attorney General, finding no evidence any of the charges were true, instead uncovered suggestions that the whole cult theory was the product of coercion by overzealous investigators, even to the point that they physically restrained children to elicit allegations of satanic activity. Sergeant Brown was in a recent marriage at the time he was indicted. They spent most of their first months together under the strain of the charge, and were eventually divorced. Brown also suffered a stroke. The Attorney General's office dismissed all the charges of alleged murder. The AG's chief special prosecutor, Shane Phelps, said that the Lifford investigation had effectively destroyed any chance of solving the disappearance. He said it was hard on the parents, because the hysteria surrounding the satanic allegations caused the search for Kelly to be forgotten. Our chances would have been much better had all that not happened, Phelps said. The case was broadcast on Dateline NBC years later. In addition, the news program Inside Edition sent a team to Gilmer, and newspapers such as the Dallas Morning News, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Houston Chronicle, and Chicago Tribune sent reporters. The New York Times interviewed local reporter Philip Williams. CNN, the cable news network, interviewed local people. This was in addition to coverage by the Gilmer Mirror and other local newspapers and TV stations. There was a book in the works in 2001, by former Gilmer Police Sergeant Bill Hamnor, which is in our midst, which contained a true story of how the criminal justice system was used, abused, and citizen civil rights destroyed and ignored in a small East Texas town, as told to the author by former Gilmer Police Chief Al McAllister. According to the promotional blurb on the internet, the blurb further states that local elected officials stood idly by, doing nothing to correct the obvious wrongs being committed, except for a courageous police chief who sacrificed his career by doing the right thing. The resulting ruined reputations and tormented lives are being played out in civil court suits to this very day. Copyright on the book, which apparently was never published, is 2001. In 2001, Brown and the Cruz filed separate civil lawsuits against Lifford, the CPS workers involved, and Lifford's investigative team, Brooks Fleig and Steve Baggs. Their respective suits were dismissed by a federal district court on what were essentially grounds of qualified immunity. Government officials cannot be sued unless certain grounds can be met, such as denial of civil rights. Meanwhile, Kelly Wilson is still missing, 20 years after her disappearance. She is presumed dead, but a body has never been found and no valid charges have ever been made in connection with the case. In researching this article, the author was told many times by different people that it's a shame there has been no closure for Kelly's family and friends. 10. Paul Armstrong and Stephen Lombard. The 58-year-old owner of a local tow truck company was arrested Wednesday after Merced County Sheriff's Department investigators said he made a false report about a stolen car. Meanwhile, sheriff's investigators say they're also looking into reports that the suspect's wife is missing, possibly in Mexico. Randy Loy Wright, owner of RTS Towing, was taken into custody by detectives around 8 a.m. at his residence in the 2000 block of Yosemite Parkway, near Anderg Avenue, according to Tom McKenzie, sheriff's spokesman. Investigators believe Wright called the California Highway Patrol in February and reported his Ford Explorer Sport Track had been stolen. The car was later found at a location in Butte County, although investigators believe Wright already knew of the car's location. Wright also signed a CHP form, stating that the car was stolen, McKenzie said. Because Wright is accused of lying on that form, McKenzie said he was arrested on suspicion of perjury. He said the reason why Wright allegedly made the false report is still under investigation. Sheriff's investigators learned of the false auto theft report while investigating a missing person case involving the suspect's wife, Karen Renee Wright, 50. Karen Wright's family members said she disappeared after making a trip to San Felipe, Mexico, on February 9. The couple had owned 2 houses in San Felipe, according to Marcia Stewart, her sister. "I've cried every night," said Stewart, about her sister's disappearance. "I want somebody to find Karen." Stewart said investigators in Mexico are also looking into her sister's disappearance. No one has been arrested, or named as a suspect, in the case of Karen Wright's disappearance, McKenzie said. "We're still keeping all of our options open and investigating all possible leads," McKenzie said. Randall Wright reported his wife missing to the Merced County Sheriff's Department on February 12, the day before he allegedly made the false report about the stolen car. According to court documents, Karen Wright filed for divorce in October, after being married to Randall Wright for 12 years. Cindy Morse, Randall Wright's attorney in the divorce case, said she was aware of Wright's arrest, but had no comment. Karen Wright claimed in court documents that her husband had threatened her and physically abused her, saying that he told her that he could kill her and nobody would know. She also said her husband broke her hand and ripped out chunks of her hair. Randall Wright, however, also claimed in court documents that his wife was abusive toward him, saying that she was delusional, and made up accusations that he was trying to poison her. Karen Wright isn't the first person connected to RTS Towing to disappear under mysterious circumstances. Two tow truck drivers who worked for the company, Stephen Lincoln Lombard, 33, and Paul Armstrong, 28, vanished on December 17, 1993. Armstrong was last seen at his West 25th Street home by his girlfriend as she left for work at 7:45 a.m. That same day, Lombard had made arrangements to meet his wife, Louise, to go Christmas shopping. He never made it to that appointment, according to family members. The next morning, Lombard's truck was found in a Kmart parking lot. The truck's keys were inside, along with a cup of coffee in the console holder. The truck's windows were rolled down, and the door was unlocked. No one has been named as a suspect in the men's disappearance, which is now considered a double homicide case. Wright was booked into the John Latoraka Correctional Center on suspicion of perjury. He's being held in lieu of $1 million bail. Mackenzie said Wright's bail is high because it was determined that he could be a flight risk. No one knows if Wright had any culpability in his stepson's death or the disappearance of his wife, but two of his employees going missing on the exact same date seems like a pretty weird coincidence.